Violence is up in Chicago and across the country, and its impact is felt not only by the victims themselves, but their families and communities. As we mentioned earlier, 56 people were shot and 11 were killed this weekend alone. So far this year, more than 2,200 people have been shot and 405 have been killed. The Trace is a national news organization covering gun violence in the U.S., and it's starting a new series to cover the short and long-term impacts of gun violence here in Chicago. Joining us to talk about this project is Lakeidra Chavis, a reporter at The Trace, working on the new Aftershocks series. Lakeidra, welcome back to Chicago tonight. What was it that led you to report on surviving gun violence in Chicago?
Yeah, so as you just mentioned, gun violence is an issue that is spoken about daily in the city. And we talk about every day, every week, every weekend, how many people have been shot around Chicago. And we wanted to report on the longer impacts that gun violence has, not just for the people who are injured, not just for the people who are killed, but for the neighbors, the family members, the friends, and the first responders and the local businesses that experience this type of trauma as well. And to really drive home that this type of violence has ripple effects, and it can last as long as a lifetime for some of the people affected.
Ripple effects, hence the name of the series, Aftershocks. Now, thousands of families experience those ripple effects of gun violence each year, as you just said. What did you learn about the families that you spoke with?
Yeah, so what I learned, speaking to people for this series, which included people who have experienced gun violence in a direct way, so they were shot and they survived, as well as families, is that the grief really is unbearable, and that it does take a lot of resources and a lot of support for people to be able to move forward in their lives. One of the things that I learned from speaking with survivors of gun violence who tended to be young, in their early 20s and their late teens, was that they did not want to be defined by this incredibly traumatic event that happened to them, that they wanted to find a way to recover mentally and physically, and try to just move on with their lives. I also found that in speaking to people, whether it was community members or people who had been directly affected, that they had a passion to help their community in some way. So feeling a need and to try to address problems that tend to lead to violence in Chicago. So, trying to provide resources for young people in their neighborhood, trying to offer childcare or educational services. So even though there was a lot of grief and a lot of trauma, there were just as many people working towards trying to resolve a lot of these issues.
And you spent a lot of time in Roseland, a neighborhood that commonly, unfortunately, experiences shootings. What support is available for survivors of gun violence and their families?
Yeah, so Roseland is similar to a lot of neighborhoods in Chicago that experience gun violence in that there are organizations there who do street outreach. Sometimes it's referred to as violence interruption, who are trying to stop the shootings in a more direct way. So working with community members to stop retaliations and things like that. What I found in Roseland, is that there were also, organizations that were started by people who had lived in the community just for decades and had saw the problems that were happening and wanted to find a way to address it. So, for example, one of the people that I spoke to is a woman named Diane Latiker, who started an organization called Kids Off the Block. And about 15 years ago, she turned her own home in Roseland into a community center to try to help, the young people and what she saw they were experiencing either at home or just in their everyday lives.
And you also reported on the Illinois Crime Victim Compensation Program. What did you find there?
Yeah, so Illinois' Crime Victim Compensation Program is a decades-old service in Illinois that basically, if someone is a victim of a violent crime or your loved one has experienced a violent crime, then you can apply and receive a financial reimbursement for any type of services that you may have had to pay for related to what happened. So that can include things like relocation, medical costs, or loss of income. We looked at the number of claims or applications that have been filed to this program between 2015 and 2020. And what we found in looking at almost 15,000 claims is that less than 4 in 10 of them actually received reimbursement. So essentially, it was this program that had been around for a really long time that people had a lot of difficulty with. It was a lot of bureaucracy. And, on the flip side, very few people knew about it, even people who had been victims of violent crime here in Chicago.
And Lakeidra, before I let you go, we've got a few seconds. I know it varies case by case, but is it common for survivors and families of victims to see some sort of relief with their cases?
Relief in terms of, a police officer or, Chicago police making an arrest in their case, that is very few. And when I spoke to, survivors who had been shot about what they expected to happen in terms of that type of justice and relief, they had pretty much made up their mind that that was a very unlikely thing to happen for them.
Okay, unfortunate for them. Lakeidra Chavis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.